The more information you can get from people, the better. Because as you know, when I've gone through, some of my contracts, it's really about controlling the whole deal through paperwork. Today, we're going to be talking about how to successfully qualify tenant buyers for a rent-owned property. So it's important to know that it's easy to find people, but we teach that you don't want to find just someone with a heartbeat and a check for $10,000, right? You've got to go a little bit more in depth to qualify people for success, because it's a real headache. I've seen it. People come to me with a deal that's gone sideways for any number of reasons, and one of the most common ones is that they didn't pre-qualify them. They didn't really check to see if they were going to be, bank ready in 3 years, or what it took for them to be bank ready in 3 years. And then, so what happens is the deal fails, the tenant buyers are frustrated, they cause a lot of noise in your life, and it can be very disruptive. So you want to work hard at qualifying these tenant buyers. So I'm going to talk about kind of a tenant buyer who qualified and bought the house very quickly, as well as the other end of the spectrum, a tenant buyer who we had to extend their contracts, and they kept needing to extend the contracts and ultimately failed out of the program, and they don't own the house. So those are kind of two ends of the spectrum. I'm going to share a little bit about them. What are the differences between those two clients, and what we can do to create an environment for our tenant buyers to succeed. Two examples. About 30 months ago, I had a house, and it was vacant, and we were ready to put a rent-owned client into it. So through our process of attracting a lot of people, this is that one property I talked about last week, where beautiful early evening, and I think I had 8 or 9 different parties kind of within a 45-minute window, and they were kind of bumping into each other, and there was a lot of energy. Lots of people were excited about this house. So anyways, found great tenant buyers, and then I went through the qualification process, which I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna walk you through my cheat sheet on how to do that. What's interesting is last week I talked about my avatars of who I'm looking for in a great tenant buyer. I've got 3 of them. My primary one is young family Fernando. And so this was a young family. They had 3 kids, and they fit the criteria. They primary characteristics were late 30s. I'd say these guys were early 30s. They had 3 kids. One income earner, not dual, but he had a good income. Credit challenges, yes. Stuck in the bad credit cycle, not so much. They were just building their credit score and couldn't qualify for a mortgage yet, but they wanted the security and the stability of owning their own home. So I found them, qualified them, went through this whole process here that I'm gonna show you. Great tenants, no issues, rent on time, and after about 12 months, he messages me and says, "Hey, I think we're ready to qualify early for a mortgage." Because he had been checking his credit score and saw that, and we talked about some of the other stuff. And so long story short, got him back connected with my mortgage broker, and it took us about an extra 30 days because we had to change the paperwork, had to talk to my investor, that sort of stuff. But we closed and qualified them, and they now own the property. Great. So they had a 3-year term with us, but they qualified after 1 year. Awesome. That's fantastic. So that's the good news story. The not so good news story over here is some tenant buyers. What I did was I had locked down a property that was for sale by owner, and I had a week to back out of the deal. And in that week, I said I was going to show it to prospective tenants as well as some trades. So I did that. I had an open house. I think I had 3 people show up over a 2-hour period, which was way too long. But I had 3 parties show up, and 2 of them not really interested. The third one, very interested, not so much about the neighborhood. And that's a very common thing. So the house was okay, and it was tidy. It wasn't necessarily super updated. And so these people were like, they fit this criteria exactly. Again, they were like, Cam, we really like your program, but we're not crazy about this house. Could you help us find a house? So at this point, I had not done tenant first. I knew it as a strategy and just hadn't done it because, like I said in previous times, I had a whole bunch of homes kind of thrown at me from tired and frustrated landlords, where I was able to lock down these homes for $100. So this was a new concept that I had not yet done before, but it's like, yeah, let's figure it out. Let's see what we can do. So they had $10,000 to put down. I pre-qualified them. They had excellent income. They had good jobs, and their credit was in a bad cycle. They were over leveraged and a bad credit score. Actually, they weren't too badly over leveraged at that time, but their credit score was just, in the 500s. So we put them into the house. Great tenants. Loved working with them. They paid rent every month on time. They paid the option credit each month on time. No issues with the rent. I think maybe once over the years or twice there was maybe a rent issue, but they're good communicators. They looked after the property. We found them the house, and we had a 3-year term. So the 3-year term came, and they were not able to qualify. Okay, so what's going on? Like, their credit score just wasn't where it was at yet. So we talked with the mortgage broker, and she said, yeah, we're going to need another probably 18 months. So I just did extension contracts to the original contracts and set up for another 2 years. So now we're at 5 years. At that time, we're approaching it, talking back with the mortgage broker. The tenants are saying, yeah, it looks good. Their jobs haven't changed. And, their income went up gradually, but their credit score was better, but their debt servicing ratio was off. Okay, why? They bought a new vehicle. And it's like, oh, crap. So since that time, I've got in my homeowner's manual that I give to my new tenant buyers, it talks about multiple ways of building their credit. They get a very specific credit letter based on their credit that we put in there after we've analyzed it and qualify them, going, yeah, they can qualify in 3 years if they do these things. And so now I've got in there, when you're in the program, don't take on any new loans. Don't go to the brick and get a do not pay for 1 or 3 years or whatever. No money down sort of thing on that stuff, because that is a new loan that is on your credit report that can put your debt servicing out of whack. So these guys got a vehicle, and it's like, oh boy. So, okay, how much more time do they need? Okay, they need another 8 months. Something like that. That one got extended to 12 months. Still great people to work with, paid rent on time, but it was frustrating. So this went on for, let's see here, how long did I put it on for? Yeah, I think it ended up being like 7, maybe 8 years. And they ended up getting another vehicle. I know, it was just, you gotta be kidding me. Like, no self-control on that. So ultimately what happened was the deal failed, and they lost their money that they put in. They lost most of it. I gave them a little bit back at the end. That's not a great story, but it's a true story, and it's accurate. And unfortunately, it happens more than we would like to admit. Recapping, one of my most successful tenant buyers had a 3-year term. They qualified after 1 year. Why? One of my least successful tenant buyers, all the same really credentials, similar income, similar house price, similar down payment, similar monthly payments, but they failed. Why? Why would one succeed and the other not? Well, I'm gonna tell you why. And basically, it comes down to habits and focus. Okay, so this is my rent-to-own qualification checklist. So when I meet with tenant buyers in person, they've kind of crossed the initial threshold of what we're looking for, right? I don't meet with people generally until I know what their approximate income is, what their approximate debt load is, how much money they've got for a down payment, right? So 9 times out of 10, if someone doesn't have a down payment, we won't work with them. Now, there are situations where I will work with clients that have got no down payment. So that's probably a question for later or a different time, but it is possible and it can be successful. I've closed several deals where the tenant had very little to put down, but they met all the other criteria. So when I meet with them in person after that stuff, I've got a brochure for them that on one side kind of explains our rent-to-own program. And then on the flip side, tenant buyer qualifications. So things I'm looking for, employment verification, job letter, pay stubs, etc. A current credit report, tax notice of assessment. I got to make sure that they are current with their taxes, or at least are on track to be. Because you can't get a mortgage with a bank if your personal income taxes aren't current. A couple pieces of government issued ID, landlord reference checks, character reference check, emergency contact. So those are the things that, like, I give them the sheet and they work through that. So now what I'm showing you is a sheet that I work through when I've got a tenant buyer that I'm working with. So applicants, the name goes here. So I want to know who their current and their previous landlords are. I would prefer to have their previous landlord than their current landlord. And the reason for that is, with the current landlord, if the tenants aren't great tenants, the current landlord will likely not be very forthcoming with me, to the point of actually lying, and they just want them out of the property. So if the tenant's behind on rent or trash the place and they want them out because they haven't been paying rent, they're probably not going to tell me. But the previous landlord's got nothing to lose. So you got to track down previous landlords. So another piece on this is, when you're talking with a prospective tenant, you're listening to what they're saying about their lives, their current living situation. Because one of the questions we talked about last week is, on that checklist of 17 questions, is not why do you have to move, it's when do you have to move. So when do you have to move is a very specific question, because what you want to hear is, well, we actually don't have to move, we're looking. Whereas someone who's being evicted or not a good relationship with the landlord for any number of reasons will say, well, we've got to find a place right away. Okay, ding, ding, ding. Like, what's that about? Right? So typically people will ask me, how long to find a good tenant buyer? And I'll say up to however long it takes, but good amount is 1 to 2.5 months. And the reason why that is because a good tenant's got to give proper notice to the current landlord. So that's why it's over a month. And if it's the middle of the month and they've got to, give notice at the end of the month, then it's another 30 days before they can move out, all that sort of stuff. So with that, if your prospective tenants start complaining about their current landlords, that is a red flag for you. And the reason why I say it's a red flag is because if they complain about their current tenants, there's a high probability that they're also going to complain about you, which means that they're not the greatest tenants. Because good tenants and a good landlord will have disputes, but they work them out and it's favorable to both parties. But if they've got, I'm not saying that always, this isn't the rule always, but it's always like an asterisk or a yellow flag that pops up for me. Okay, they're complaining about the current landlord. Why is that? So you dig deeper. So yeah, talk to the current landlord if you can, but ideally you're also talking to the previous landlord. So I had one client who seemed good on paper and couldn't give me a proper landlord reference. So she told me where she lived. So I searched up that house, found out who owned the house. So I found the name, did a search for the name in Winnipeg, and I think it was 411.ca, and this person's name came up like 9 times with, I think there was 8 different phone numbers. I had a red flag about this prospective tenant buyer, but I couldn't place what it was. So I ended up calling all these numbers for this guy listed on 411.ca. Couple of people was like, no, that's not my property. Lots of no answers. left messages. 2 days later, a guy calls me back and said, yeah, I'm the owner of that property. Do not rent to this person. So that was good. I ended the evaluation for that person. And I mean, the guy went into much more detail and kind of confirmed some stuff. But anyways, what I'm showing you here on this checklist is not only the key things to do, but how to dig deeper in your due diligence and your qualification process to figure out, if this is a tenant that you want. So also I will ask for references, and not family members and not friends either. It's like, I want someone that you volunteered with or somebody else at work, all that sort of stuff. And you always got to verify that these are actually people I know I've had reference or numbers given to me from tenant buyers who was clearly a friend. Some questions in, or like throw something like in there, like they say they don't have pets, but I'll say, so how old is their cat? And they'll kind of stumble, go, and kind of throw the reference off just to verify. It's kind of crazy that we have to do that, but we do have to do that. And I literally have had people that give me fake people to call as a landlord or a reference. All right, now we get to the internet has been amazing for this stuff, right? Some of you just starting out, you've only known the internet. Back when I started out, a lot of these tools were not on the internet. So Google search is wonderful. Now you've got their photo ID, you've got their actual name, you can search for them. Facebook, oh, it's beautiful because you just look at their profile. Do they fit the picture that they're presenting to you, or is their picture on Facebook very different from what they presented you with when you meet them in person, right? So, met with this guy and seemed like a good guy on his Facebook profile. He's throwing parties at his house, and nothing wrong with parties, but all this stuff, filters into this, and like what kind of parties, and people wearing, FU shirts and stuff like that. It's like, these are not people that I think I want in my property, right? So Facebook is a wonderful, of course, you can Facebook, I'm talking about social media. Do a social media search. Challenge in some of the social media searches is that you'll show up as viewing their profile, right? TikTok does that, where it'll actually show you who's looked at your profile. Facebook doesn't do that. So Facebook is an awesome tool to help verify kind of the picture that they're presenting to you. So depending on where you're located, a couple of these things here now, you might have, you might not have. So the bad tenant list is, if you're part of a network of real estate investors who've got properties, there's probably a list that goes around as like, put this tenant on here. So you want to search that list. I'm not saying there is even one in your area, but there probably is someone. Talk to someone else who's really active as an investor and say, hey, is there a bad tenant list that I can do a fair verification? This is not a public list, so enough on that. Rental tenancies engine. So depending on which province or state you're in and which region you're in, larger areas will have rules and regulations for tenants and landlords, right? So here is called the Rental Tenancy Branch and Rental Tenancy Commission, and which I've got a hearing this coming Friday. We can talk about that a different time. There will be a search engine with them that you can search up people to see if they are in the system as being evicted or claims against them, all that sort of stuff. So that's specifically within your province or state. So Winnipeg has got one here. It's called the Rental Tenancy Engine, and it's part of the Rental Tenancy Board. So if you just Google, rental tenancy, your province or your city, it'll probably come up. There is a fee for that. There isn't a fee for the bad tenants list, at least where I'm at. Some people might add a fee, and it might be worth it. It certainly is worth it if you can save yourself, the headache of not putting a bad tenant into your property. King's Bench is really just a legal search. It's provincially based. There is a federal one, but which you might want to look at. But if you got to search a federal one and you've got red flags because you think this person might be on the federal, probably a sign right there that you don't want them to be your tenant. But the provincial one or the state one, I'm not sure what it's called in the states, but wherever there's court system and there's lawsuits, small claims court is a lawsuit that's 10,000 and under. That's a very common one. And then there's 10,000 and above. Those will all come up. You want to see. So I had one client who I did have some red flags, very nice people, but it's like there's something off. And so I searched them up, and I searched him and I searched her, and she had a claim from a insurance company for $250,000 against her. And it's like, that's a red flag. So let's just say that she didn't get into my property. And yeah, so that's a great tool. So from there, it's for me, this is a check mark, continue for rent own. I will use this sheet for a straight rental. I've got straight rentals as well. I'll use this sheet. I'll do all the same information here because it's universal for me. And, so I might cross out rent own and I'll just say, for rent, rental, because I'll have the property here. Then I've just got a checklist, do I have proof of job, income, employment verification, credit check, notice of assessment from federal tax, CRA or IRS, whichever one you're using. Other, do I have the social insurance number or social security number? The more information you can get from people, the better. Because as you know, when I've gone through, some of my contracts, it's really about controlling the whole deal through paperwork, which is really important because you want to have your assets covered. And how we do that is through all the legal documents that I give you when we go through the 6 weeks to rent on cash flow course. I give you all of the contracts, and I think it's a total of about 27 that legal contracts that I give you. You don't use them all, but you've got access to all these in different scenarios. And so that's what all that is for. This is my due diligence. It's there's another word for it, that underwriting. This is the underwriting process of just making sure that this is a good deal. So once I go through that and they're approved, that kind of ends that process. And then I go back to the tenant buyers and let them know that they are approved. And the next step is to, meet up, bring your deposit check of 10,000 or whatever it is. I'll bring the contracts, we'll review them. You can take them to your lawyer if you want, and we sign them up. So that's how I find and qualify and successfully qualify my tenant buyers. So going back to the two stories of the two different scenarios, why did one succeed and the other failed? Well, really it came down to, I think I said this already, it came down to habits and focus. So the first client who qualified was just hyper focused on repairing their credit. It was really a game for them. They gamified it. I gave them, with my mortgage broker, the information that they needed to move forward. And in that information, typically it's a one-page letter that talks about what their credit score is and what are the 2 or 3 top things that they need to do in the next 2 years to 3 years to be bank ready. So if they follow that, and assuming that they don't take on any more debt outside of what they've already got, and they their income stays the same and or higher, there really should be no issues. And that's what the first client did. And the second one, they kept adding on to their debt service, and that's why they failed. So I provided both parties this environment and this platform for them to build on, to move forward, to qualify. So it's like running, trying to prep for a marathon. It's like they both have the tools that they need. Now they just have to use those tools and exercise them and do the things that they need to do, right? So you start off by, if you're brand new, you start off by, let's get a mile under your belt, okay? And You start to follow other people who are doing this and what are they doing to get that first mile, and then building on the second mile. You join some smaller races that are like a 5K or a fun run, that sort of stuff, and you keep building up, you keep practicing. It's the same with this. You keep watching your credit score, you keep doing the things on it, like use your credit card every month and pay it off every month. So it's really just a matter of them doing that. And so what I've started doing is, with all my clients, is that we'll do a kind of a every 6 month credit check, and just to, are you doing these things, just the way that we get into the house and we check to make sure that they're taking care of the house, changing the furnace filter, emptying the gutters, yada yada, right? We want them to take care of the house. It's good for us because they're looking after our asset while they're qualifying to own it, but then we're also teaching them. Same with their credit. And so that's really what they want to do. So we did everything we could for this second family. We had them with an excellent mortgage broker. We were patient with them. We extended their contracts. We showed them what they needed to do. In the end, they just failed to get ready for the marathon. And when the day for the marathon, they kept coming to, okay, the marathon's tomorrow. You ready? I'm not ready. You know what? They're eating a bag of chips. I'm not ready. And we just kept coming up to that. And ultimately it's like, okay, well, we can't continue this on anymore. We have to end the relationship. Doing this sheet, doing the things in this sheet, you will find, and you will be able to successfully find great tenant buyers. Will there be exceptions to these rules? Absolutely. It's maybe a 10% churn rate of people who I thought were really good, and we get in there, it's just like, wow, I got fooled, or maybe I just didn't do enough due diligence. That's a good possibility. There's been times where I've filled properties and I didn't do the due diligence that I needed to do. I got lazy. Sometimes I got lucky, and other times I did not get lucky, and the deal turned sideways, and it was not a great process. So this happens, but learn from my mistakes, right? I've been doing rent to own since 2010. I've made a ton of mistakes. Learn what not to do, because what you can do is you can stand on the shoulders of other real estate investors who have gone before you and done things, trial and error, have got big wins, but they've also got big losses, right? So every successful person has had losses. Unfortunately in this day and age, not a lot of people talk about their losses. And I'm trying to do a more intentional job of sharing about my losses, just to keep it real and to learn from me. I've made mistakes that my coaches told me not to do, and I failed miserably. And it's just like, that's embarrassing, but I learned the hard way. And sometimes we just got to learn the hard way. The school of hard knocks is unfortunately a fantastic teacher if you learn from it and change your ways.